Hi, I'm Cindy Palm, lay leader from the First United Methodist Church in downtown Elgin, Illinois, and this is your motivational moment from the Bible. These motivational moments are designed to go along with what you heard in the Sunday morning worship, maybe help you with your Bible study, or just be a little bit more to get you through your week. Have you ever noticed that the majority of songs written, at least in the last century, are mostly about love? It's true. Why do you suppose that is? Maybe it's because it seems to be the one thing we know the most about. Or maybe it's the one thing we want to know the most about. But search the top 40 of any given year in the last 100 years, and you'll wind up with only a handful of songs that don't factor in some sort of message about love. In the 1950s, we learned that love is a many splendored thing. In the 1960s, Nat King Cole taught us how to spell it. In 1966, the Beatles told us that all you need is love. And in the 70s, we found out that love will keep us together. Until we found out from the Captain and Tennille themselves that that isn't true. So just to be safe, the Bee Gees decided that before entering into any relationship, it was best to ask, how deep is your love? In the 80s, we discovered that love lifts us up where we belong. But I'm not so sure about that either, because I'm still waiting for some hot uniformed officer to carry me off into the sunset. In the 1990s, Elton John asked, "Can you feel the love tonight?" Well, can you? But for all the singing we do about it, do we really even know what love is? I mean, we look at our partners, our children, our pets, piece of chocolate cake, and we think, well, of course I know what love is. But so often our words and our actions are anything but loving. It's sometimes challenging enough to love the people we profess to love. It's even harder once we move outside of that circle, to an irritating coworker or neighbor, to obnoxious people you encounter or see on the internet, to deep-rooted prejudices that rear their ugly heads. We judge, we criticize, we hurt, we divide, we ignore, all while claiming to be followers of Christ. Have you ever noticed how fans or followers will often mimic their favorite artist or band? When Madonna first came on the scene, she had a very distinctive ragtag look. Do you remember that? And soon there were hundreds of teenage girls all sporting that same look. I once stayed at a hotel that was attached to a concert venue where a band called Devo was playing that night. Their trademark at the time were these things called energy domes. I call them flower pots. I happen to have one because my husband is a fan of their music. But the only reason I knew Devo was playing there was because the hotel was filled with people all walking around with their energy domes on. I mean, grown men proudly wearing their energy domes. This type of thing happens all the time. You see it all the time. I mean, how many sparkly gloves were sold during Michael Jackson's heyday? So if we are followers of Jesus, are we excitedly mimicking him? I mean, to mimic some of these rock stars, you have to be a big fan. You gotta be all in. Are we all in for Jesus? Or do we buy tickets for the cheap seats, way in the back, and call ourselves fans simply for showing up? Jesus wondered that himself. Early one morning, after he had been crucified, after he had risen, he met some of the disciples at the shore near where they were fishing. He invited them to bring some fish over to where he was. They made a little campfire, cooked it up, and together they ate breakfast. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Peter, "Hey, Peter, do you love me?" Now remember, Peter was the one who had denied Christ 3 times on that fateful night. After Jesus had been arrested, 3 people identified Peter as a follower of Christ. And all 3 times, Peter had denied that he was. So you can't blame Jesus, just checking to see where things stood. Peter responds, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus responds, Then feed my lambs. A little while later, Jesus asks Peter again, do you love me? Again, Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus then says, then take care of my sheep. A little more time passes and Jesus once again approaches Peter. Do you love me, Peter? Peter once again says, Lord, you know all things. You have to know that I love you. Then feed my sheep, Jesus replies. Do you think Peter was getting the point of this? Jesus wanted confirmation for each time Peter claimed to love Jesus, but didn't. For each time he swore he'd never let anything happen to Jesus, but didn't. For each time his words went one way and his actions went another. Do you love Jesus? Do you? How many times would he have to ask you? And why would he have to ask you? What would he see or know that would compel him to ask? We mimic who we love. We aspire to be like the people we admire, the people we respect, the people we love. So where's the disconnect? Do we really even know what love is? Some of you who follow me on social media know that we are having quite a time trying to get a new refrigerator delivered. The first one was damaged by the delivery people. The next one that arrived was the wrong one. And what I didn't realize was my last thread of patience. I kind of flipped out on the poor delivery guy, like it's his fault. But afterwards, I could hear Jesus say, Cindy, do you love me? When you're cut off in traffic, when your kids fail to do what you've asked them to do for the 100th time, when your spouse does that thing you hate, when you get pushback for not wearing a mask, or when you see someone not wearing a mask, when a gay couple moves into the house next door, when someone gets your order wrong. How many times are we ugly to each other? And each time Jesus says, do you love me? Dr. Brooks spoke yesterday about loving God intentionally. My husband was intentional in buying his energy dough. He wanted to be like Devo. If you love Jesus, how can you be intentional about that love so that you can be like Jesus? Peter's denial came as no surprise to Jesus. Remember, he told the disciples at the Last Supper that one of them would deny him. He knew then who it would be. He knew that his whole fan club was going to run away into the darkness. One of them would even try to betray him. And yet, he did it anyway. He suffered death on the cross, knowing we would deny him, knowing we would betray him, knowing we would not remember a single thing he said, knowing we're a hot mess. And he did it anyway. Why? Because he loves us that much. You know, there's a song about love that I forgot to mention. It was released by a band called Foreigner in 1984. The first line of the chorus goes like this. I want to know what love is. I want you to show me. Jesus shows us every day, and we don't deserve it. But he does it anyway. No matter how much we love Jesus, we are never going to get it right because of our flawed human nature. But maybe we could be a bit more intentional. And the next time we are tempted to be less than who we want to be, we stop and listen so we can hear Jesus say, hey, do you love me? I'm Cindy Palm. This is your motivational moment from the Bible. Have a good week.